Chapter 16. It was a mournful pair who dismounted without haste at a little distance and moved forward for a closer examination. Sam's face was tight.
"This is the lowest I have seen yet," he ground out. "Killing a girl, and with Morgan in jail too. That'll be nice news waiting for him when he gets out."
Pat said nothing. Walking around the prone girl, and he continued to look her over with care. When he straightened up to glance at Sam, the latter was utterly unprepared for the first words he spoke, quietly and deliberately. "This girl isn't Candace Cowan, Sam."
"What?"
Salone's stillness was marked. His sharp glance went to the girl's face once more. It was stained with dirt and blood, and positive identification wasn't easy, but of his own accord, he would never have voiced a doubt.
"What makes you say that?"
he jerked out. "Look closer at her clothes," was the level answer.
"I seen 'em."
Sam was still mystified.
"What about it?"
"You never seen Candace wearing that plaid skirt in her life," Pat pointed out. "She never wore gloves either. This girl's laying on one, and there's another one yonder." Sam swore under his breath. It was like Stevens to take notice of those little items plain enough now that they were pointed out. The average man would have failed to do so, just as Sam had.
"Well,"
the latter scratched his grizzled thatch vigorously with some show of relief.
"Well, I reckon you're right at that, and I'm glad for Candace anyhow, but who's this girl that looks so much like her, Stevens, and what's she doing here?"
Pat didn't hurry over that one. "Well, I think I know her. Maybe we can make sure. Take a look at that glove first. They're often marked." Sam walked over and picked up the glove out of the dust. Its size declared that none but a girl could have owned it. Slow turned back the cuff, and breaking the stride as he did so.
"Hey, there's a name here," he exclaimed. "Kate S.H.A. Why, that's Jim Schaefer's girl."
His eyes darted back to the still body. Sitting on one heel, Pat gazed away in grim thought. Sam's own expression of perplexity was slowly increasing.
"Schaefer only lives a couple miles south of here," he mused aloud. "Maybe Kate drifted over here easy enough, but how come someone shot her? Unless they maybe mistaken her for Candace too, maybe?"
Pat was already beyond that point. "Most of Galloway's hands would have been brought here from some other range," he said, reflected. "Only if a few of them could have seen Candace more than twice."
"Sure, and that could go for any older man too, for that matter."
"Well, you're right," Pat nodded to himself. "Come to think of it, I'm not sure, but I'm rather inclined to favor that slant." Sam caught the direction of his thought.
"But hell, Stevens, how could them hombres hope to pin anything like that on Morgan while he's in jail?"
"They couldn't, of course." Pat's smile was tolerant. "But we've gone out of our ways to write ourselves down as Ray Morgan's special cronies, remember?" Sam's jaw sagged.
"Oh, and we've been obliging them by riding over here and finding her."
He broke you off then, stubbornness in his manner.
"It sure looks like our cue to be pulling our freight fast and be saying nothing, but I ain't doing it."
"Nope," Pat assented at once. "We can't let Kate down, and there's no reason why we can't just happen to delay reporting this for an hour or two longer, Sam," he added softly. Salone's glance darted to his face.
"What are you thinking of?" he growled.
just a little arrangement of a detail here. Pat's answer was curt. I warned Galloway to expect the worst, and he certainly got it coming out after this outrage, but probably he won't expect it so soon. Sam started for his horse, only to pause. What about her? He glanced. We'll just take that other glove along, Pat said practically, retrieving it from under the body and stuffing it into his pocket. But I don't recommend moving her an inch. Lawler will be interested in this, and we want him to be. Okay, well, let's get moving then. Sam was already peering about them uneasily. Sure, but let's take a look first in Morgan's shed. Pat was direct. See if you can't pick up a star-cross iron. One was not available, however Ray may have done with one or two branding irons he must have made. Finding an old running iron, Pat said it would do, and they struck off across the range. Sober faces and resolute, they were soon on Flag Range once more. A yearling calf, I reckon? Sam inquired as they pushed on with care, keeping to cover and making sure they wouldn't be observed. Pat nodded. One we can shove over onto Star-Cross graze without too much trouble, Pat said. It took some hunting to locate the animal exactly suiting their purpose, but at last they spotted one wandering along a willowy creek bottom. Several minutes' search failed to turn up its mother in the immediate vicinity, and it seemed a safe bet the calf had already been recently weaned. That'll do fine, Pat muttered. Drop a rope on that critter, Sam, and take off. I'll keep watch. A pair of genuine rustlers could hardly have gone to work with more effective stealth. While Pat maintained a careful surveillance of their surroundings, the squat man snaked the calf out of the brush and hustled it off towards Morgan's range with all possible despair. At one point, Stephen spotted a distant puncher on his way across the range. He didn't drift this way, and they stayed low until he was gone from sight, but a half hour later saw them well into Star-Cross ground. After building a tiny fire in a hollow to heat the running iron, they threw the calf, and Sam knelt by its side. Should I vent this flag brand? He asked, pausing. Pat shook his head. Torture it into a rough Star-Cross near as you can, he instructed. We wanted to look like a botched job. Sam, who at need could work as expertly as any range blotter alive, artistically created an overbrand that could hardly have been mistaken for anything else. The calf bawled and writhed. Nodding his satisfaction with the job, Pat whipped the hogging string off and watched the animal buck jump away. Well, that part of the job's done, he commented. Now, make it real good. The other half may not prove quite so easy, but it's got to be done. Sam gazed at him dubiously. Just how far are you figuring to go with this business? He inquired. Pat's grin was brief. Far enough so that there can't be any mistake about it in Lawler's mind. Oh, well, if that's the case. After dropping the running iron far enough from the ashes of the fire for it to have been an accident, they took to the horses again and turned back towards the Flag Range. I guess we're after a flag-branded horse now? Hazarded Sloane. One with a broken shoe, if possible, Pat agreed. It may be something of a chore to spook out one of Galloway's corrals. But whether his morning visit had anything to do with it, they found it virtually impossible to proceed within a mile of the Flag Ranch without running into some mounted man who might or might not be watcher. Although they succeeded in keeping out of sight, both realized that their plan was blocked, at least at the present. Sam urged a prudent retreat. Looks like we're licked, Stevens. There ain't no getting through them hombres, let alone get back again. Pat failed to reply. watching a rider who jogged off across the range alone, like a man on an errand. "Well, maybe we don't need to hunt any further," he said slowly. Sloane glanced the way he was looking. "I see. You figure we could snag that juniper over there and help ourselves to his bronc?" "I'll take another look," Pat grinned. "It's not only a flag horse, Sam, but, unless I'm much mistaken, it's that rangy buckskin stallion that Mace rides occasionally. Could you improve on that?" Keeping to cover and circling rapidly, they were able to intercede the flag man while he was crossing a corner of Morgan's Star-Cross range. And to their surprise, as they rode boldly forward, it proved to be no less of a person than Pike Taggart, that crusty flag foreman. Taggart regarded them warily as they closed in. "I got nothing to say to you, Stevens," he barked. "You might as well shove along." Pat didn't even bother to answer. It was Sam who spoke. "What do we do with him, Stevens?" he asked, sober-faced. "It's a plain case of trespass here on Morgan's grass." "Well, we might make him walk," Pat responded, as if talking about someone not present. "Maybe that'll stick in his mind next time." Taggart strove to whirl his horse away, but it was already too late. Reaching out swiftly, Pat clamped an iron grip on the stallion's headstall, and Pat closed in from the other side, and his bold stare probing Pike's rugged features coldly. "Yeah?" he purred invitingly. "You were saying?" Hard-bitten as he was, Taggart stayed his hand with stern self-representation in this sudden emergency. Despite their lightness of tone, he did not underestimate this pair for an instant. They could be dynamite, as he had already found out. Taggart's tone was flat and deadly with rage. "I don't know what your game might be, boys, but you best cut it short," he rasped out stiffly. "Sure, we'll do that." Almost casually, Sloane leaned forward and slugged him alongside the ear. "I'll even save you the trouble of lifting your leg," Sam said as the flagman doubled out of the saddle and tumbled to the ground. Scrambling away from the stallion's restless heels, Taggart had all he could do to keep from jerking his gun. The impulse surging strong in his soul, and his fingers worked convulsively. Pat was watching narrowly for the slightest move. "You'll pay for this, Stevens." Pike choked out, his leather face congested. "I'll chance it." Pike's retort was icy. "Just hope you don't be overreaching yourself again, Taggart." With a jerk of his head, he signaled to Sam. The seething foreman watched them turn away, Stevens leading the riderless buckskin. Without haste, they rode off in the general direction of the lazy mare. But once well out of the sight of the man that they had set afoot, they swung rapidly around on their course, first making for the point in which they had overbranded the calf. Swinging into Taggart's vacant saddle, Pat made certain clear tracks there where he would be satisfied that could be read plain to the next man who visited this spot, however he might misinterpret their significance. He started directly for the Star-Cross then, while Sam hung back with the other horses and continued his thoughtful work in the dust of Morgan's yard, ending up by removing his own and Sam's tracks with a branch of mesquite. Finishing, he waved at Sam, and they turned Taggart's buckskin loose, chasing it in the general direction of the flag range where it would eventually be picked up, and finally they set out for town. "It could have been a mistake dragging Taggart into this setup," Sam remarked, glancing across at his companion. Pat evinced no uneasiness on this score. "A thorough acquaintance with Jess Lawler's one-track mind has been useful to me before this," he returned. "I'm playing a long shot today, Sam. If it doesn't go off like a firecracker as I expect, it won't work at all, so don't be worrying about it." His chief concern as he rode into Dutch Springs an hour later was dispelled when he saw Sheriff Lawler stepping into his jail office. The lawman was available. Pat slid out of the saddle and tossed his reins to Sam. "Well, this is it. See you later." Lawler looked up from his desk at Pat's entrance. A shade of annoyance crossed his rugged face, while his forehead bore to save in the mildest of terms. "What is it now, Stephen?" he asked colorlessly. Pat pretended great reluctance. "Well, I'm sorry to bring this to you, Jess," he said. "I'm afraid things have gone pretty far this time." "Well, out with it. Seems to be your purpose in life is to bring me grief. What is it now?" "Well, something or other seems to be going over there on the young Morgan range," Pat told him. "I didn't try too hard to learn what for fearing of covering tracks, Jess, but Sam and we did see what looks like a dead girl there laying at Morgan's ranch yard. And you know Candace Cowan's been worked over here and off to keeping that place together for Ray," he reminded the sheriff. His features stiffened. Lawler fired out a number of severe questions. Pat as promptly grew recitant, however. "Well, as I say, I didn't nose around too much, Jess," he said innocently. "I knew you'd be wanting to report on it right off." Lawler strapped on his cartridge belt and took on the hat and the Mackinaw jacket. "Well, I'll be riding out there," he growled. "I may want to talk to you, Stevens, when I get back." "I'll be around." Lawler barged out with a backwards look. Sam was waiting when Pat emerged from the jail in a more leisurely pace.
"Man, he's sure burning up the brush," he gestured after the sheriff. "You didn't come right and tell him it was Candace there laying on the star-cross, did you?"
"I may have put such an idea in his head." Pat was unwontedly sober. "Could have been a dirty trick night, but it can't hurt Katie now for a day."
"What do you do now, Stevens?"
Sam was curious. "Now we just wait." They were headed down for the comfortable chairs that were at the hotel porch when they saw Mace Galloway enter the Gold Eagle. They exchanged glances, and Sam's full lips were pursed.
"We better have ourselves a drink, haven't we?"
They raked their broncs and stepped into the saloon. Galloway turned at the bar and glanced toward them pompously. His gaze held out on Stephen's face, and he broke into a low chuckle.
"Well, well, here's my shadow now," he rumbled good-humoredly. "Expect I can't go far from here out without stumbling over you. Ain't figuring on having me thrown in jail, are you, Stevens?"
The man had a presence, and he commanded considerable authority of manner. Jake, the bartender, discreetly grinned with him, and Galloway's closing jibe being obviously the most far-fetched the rancher could bring to mind. Pat had an answer already. "Well, I hadn't thought of it, Mace, but I will," he promised coolly. "It might simplify his matters, I thought." He and Sam moved to a table, from where they idly followed Galloway's boasting talk. Waving a cigar expansively, the latter appeared utterly at ease, drawing various acquaintances into a conversation and thoroughly enjoying himself. The glances he occasionally tossed Pat were slyly malicious. No doubt he was thoroughly aware of the damage which had been done at the other Lazy Mare's ranch last night, and how privately laughing up his sleeve.
"What a poisonous personality," Sam muttered in disgusted fashion. "Do me good to cut that swelled pup down a few sizes."
Pat's expression was bland. He didn't appear unduly disturbed, yet he spent a good portion of his time glancing down the street through the window. The afternoon waned, and Sheriff Lawler didn't appear. Supper time came, and Mace Galloway strolled over to the hotel, and after eating, he came back as cockily and replete and smiling.
"Waiting for something?"
he asked Pat with obvious guile. If Sam was boiling, Pat did not so much as dignify a response to this manifest attempt at needling him. Glancing past the window again, he unconsciously straightened. Just Lawler came striding wearily down the street, making straight as an arrow for the Gold Eagle. Galloway saw him enter.
"Howdy, Jess," he called out heartily. "Been busy today, huh? Come on in and wet your whistle."
Striding forward bleakly, Lawler laid a heavy hand on his arm. "Not now, Galloway. Sorry. You'll have to come along. I'm taking you in for Candace Cowan's murder." Mace fell back, his face suddenly ashen.
"Murder?" he gasped. "Jess, what in the tarnation is this all about?"
"Well, I'll remind you if that's necessary. You caught the Cowan girl over branding one of your calves, Galloway. Killed her and packed her over to Morgan's place, where you dumped her in his yard." Lawler's rolling tone was final. "No use arguing, Mace, because I tracked your horse. That big buckskin that was wearing that busted cock. Come along." End of chapter 16.